Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called The Persistence of Humans, written by Her Sunk. It was a regular day in the massive chamber of the conglomerate. Another day of bickering and minor pettiness. The Council of the Stars, they called it, the Eternal Alliance, was touted to those outside it. The Eternal Argument, more like. As our empire had no requests or claims to cycle, I, Lord Tal-Unay, as a Taurian representative, merely had to endure this drudgery of diplomats arguing until their tongues, or tendrils, in the case of the gong, turned into slag. The day changed when a bedraggled Riskian acquired tetrapods from a rather, if I may be clinical, uninteresting part of the galaxy, entered the chamber with a request for, put simply, help. They were being slaughtered in their defensive war against the Quay, losing half a dozen colonies to the scourge of Quay in the span of a quarter cycle. Losing badly, the Riskans were being threatened to extinction. It said as the translator unit struggled through the remarkable speech patterns of the Riskan language. The Quay were outside our council, and was considered as formidable in terms of military power, as many of us combined. We, that is, the Taurians, had very little to aid the Riskians. So it was decided after a brief distant consultation with the Echelon Master that we withhold any offer and let the plea play out amongst the stronger races that could send sufficient aid, though it pained me. The Riskian must have been desperate indeed to ask the Council of the Stars for help. Few had done so, and fewer still had come up better than they would have without the aid. The greedy diplomats offered to send their own auxiliary forces to aid the Riskians for a few concessions. The Riskians, desperate but not stupid, did try to negotiate better terms. But it was not the, in my opinion, dishonorable negotiations that I kept my eyes on that day. My eyes were upon my friend, Admiral John Silvers. He was the current cycle representative from the human race. Just as I knew he would the moment the Riskian began telling the story of its people's slaughter. He was intently focused on the proceedings. Knowing John and the humans, he and the rest of his stubby race were probably even now ready to aid the desperate Riskians, no thought regarding the consequences. John glared with anger at the other diplomats while speaking softly to his assistant, and through the distance device they used to communicate to higher command many systems away. I knew what was coming, and soon after it became truth. I sighed in my mind when the Riskian, now livid with the resignation after yet another greedy grab for diplomats, began to leave, too proud to even accept the insanely costly help from the other races. And, like I suspected, the Admiral rose up and paced down the steps to approach the leaving Riskian. John caught up just by the entrance. I sat close enough to hear his proclamation to the Riskian. He promised grimly that the human race would come to their aid in every way they could supply. The Riskian scoffed, or rather spluttered a little fog of dust from his nasal appendage. At this outrageous offer, he demanded to know what obscene price the humans would demand. It was most likely believing that this was yet another ruse or insult from the Council. If only they knew the humans as well as I did. No price at all, John said firmly. He had already discussed it with his general, and in turn the proximate, and it had already been decided they would help if the Riskians would have them. It always amazed me how quickly the humans came to decisions. Those of the Council that heard this laughed at the blatant breach of protocol and considered it, as always, as silly human recklessness and naivety. Smallings, some said. Pay no attention, others said. A few others, though, well aware of humans, held their silence. The Riskian was obviously distrustful, but John waved his assistant forward and asked the Riskian to at least listen to the offer, preferably outside these cold, hollow halls, as Admiral Silvers put it. Maybe a bit louder than his pride would admit in public. When the Riskian and John's assistants had left the hall, and John sat down again, he and I shared a look. He smiled at my resigned look, nodding. The rest of the meeting continued and ended soon after, without any other diverge from the usual bickering of meager profit from this and that. After that, I went to meet up with John, as was our custom after these meetings, at his office in the Western Sector to share in conversation. All the 32 races in the conglomerate had their own sector in this massive space station, all adapted to their own race. But the humans were their usual cadence and adapted their sector to suit us Taurians. They called us their eternal allies, so they made us comfortable in their space. When they called us eternal allies, as opposed to the Council, it held weight. It meant something. I knocked, a human custom I found very amusing, and walked in. I bowed slightly to avoid bumping my head ridge on the roof. Perfect adaptation would be prohibitively expensive. John Silvers was sitting in his armchair, looking into his holographic fireplace. It was sparkling red and yellow. This was another amusing sight for me. He had explained it once as a comforting sight. John did wish he was allowed a proper fireplace, though, with real fire and burning logs. It was declined, obviously. The request seemed preposterous to the masters of the station, strange for the humans indeed. "Hello, Tull. Please come sit," John said, gesturing to the specially made chair beside him. The brilliant human engineers had designed it from our own chair designs so that the Taurian could be comfortable even in the most private place in the human sector. The humans have affectionately called us oak trees with faces in the past. We take it in stride as we return the favor and call them stumps with hearts. I sat down, again astounded how the design of the chair was more comfortable than even my own office chair, my elongated limbs fitting perfectly. "The Riskians seem apprehensive, but they've accepted our offer. They're just working out the kinks, as it were." A moment of silence as John looked into the virtual fire before looking at me. "Will you try and dissuade me, or rather us, to aid in their war?" he asked blatantly. "I would not be your friend if I didn't try," I said and continued. "It's reckless, you know that. The Quay might be the most powerful, independent faction outside the Council. There is no one in the Council that will help you in this. There is a slim chance that you might turn the tide. By echelon, I know the force of the humans, but the cost will be massive," I continued, hoping to inundate some rationality into my foolish friend. I was a fool for trying, really. "Probably, most likely," John said, nodding sagely, ignoring my warnings as usual. I sighed. "But you and the rest of your stubborn race will still do it, won't you?" I stated. "Of course," he answered with adamant conviction. "It is not your fight." John was silent for a moment before looking at me, his blue eyes reflecting the holographic fire. "Neither was it yours when we were under a similar threat," he stated solemnly. "That's not the same, and you know it. We were blood-sworn allies long before the swarm descended upon your lands. The same cannot be said about the Riskians. You probably haven't even encountered them before today," I accused knowingly. John's grin confirmed my belief, and I continued. "They will not repay you, nor will they be grateful for your sacrifice. And that is exactly what it will be. A sacrifice. A sacrifice for an ungrateful race of no significance." John cocked his eyebrow, another strange human quirk, to express his disbelief. "That's very harsh, Tull," he stated, making me thinking I had suddenly become heartless. I shook my head. "I'm sorry. They're not insignificant, of course. No race was. A grateful lesson the humans had taught us. But you know what I mean." John shrugged and returned his eyes to the fire. "I suspected that was the way the rest of the universe looked at us too, in the beginning. Of no significance," John said with a sad smile. I could only agree. Yes, a majority in the council wished to stop your reckless spread, as you were starting to leave the confines of your soul. Not the Taurians, though. No, we decided to be your protector, to vouch for you. Why? In the beginning, intrigue predominantly, we found the race of humans to be fascinating. So crude in many ways, yet filled with such potential, such vibrancy. Maybe we saw something of our past in you. Or at least what we wished we had been, I said and added jokingly, even though you're so stubby and short-lived. John laughed. You know, they told me that the Taurians were the first to contact us back when we first left the Sol system, John said, and then I tilted my head. Really? I always thought the Gonga were the first. John snorted with suppressed disgust. Those jelly babies, squishy confectionery, they just tried to get an advantage on some obscure mining deal by spreading that rumor. The discoverer of the chaotic humans. Oh, John said theatrically, and continued. No, it was the Taurians that gave us a chance, and though we were frightened in the beginning, we will never forget this first encounter. You were the proof to our endless search for something more. That something was out there. We had for so long looked up into the stars and hoped. Countless movies, books, and dreams, and it was all true. And you helped us. You gave us technology. You gave us knowledge. You gave us wisdom. You gave us direction. You helped us to see how marvelous the universe truly was. I scratched my neck in discomfort, a human trait I picked up. Though you speak true, John, and you know this, we only gave basic rudimentary scraps, nor did we give it in an altruistic fashion. We hoped to have a lesser partner, I said truthfully, though the past did sting, how we had tried to subtly manipulate our new friends. It was only a few cycles when the Taurians decided to give humans a chance, so long ago, but I remember it clearly. John laughed. Indeed. But you still did it, and permit me to be a bit smug. I think we repaid our debt, John said with a wink. I returned a smile. It was true. The stubby humans had repaid it 1,000-fold. The deep rot, the decimating plague, and then a war in every front. Greedy races wishing to pick up the splinters of the Taurian echelon as it crumbled from within. We were being pushed back completely. Then the humans arrived. They descended with the fervor and rage of 1,000 exploding stars. They charged into the deep dark of the Taurian space and beyond to defend their friends, even sending medical teams to the Taurian planets to save those dying of the virulent plague. They lost millions, if not billions, thousands upon thousands of ships and even planets lost in the deep void, just to defend those they considered friends. When it all had ended, when the smoking embers of the human rage rescinded, when they kept vigil over our borders, when the Taurian race, barely surviving the rot, were it not for the human medicine, looked at our short friends and their sacrifice, we were truly humbled. We felt pity for ourselves and our behavior. But the humans stayed and helped us rebuild. They had embraced us, made us theirs, as we would in time do the same. After that, well, the rest is history. So is that why you are so quick to come to the Riskian's aid? To prove something? To gain another ally? I asked, no malice behind the words. John thought for a moment before laughing, giving me a sly look. Jealous? I laughed then at the notion, disturbing the holographic display slightly with the rumbling. Not at all, my dearest friend. I began, but paused a moment before continuing. We are just worried that this might not be a fight you can win. A fight that, I must remind you, you have no stake in. A moment of silence passed between us. There is a greater stake in this war of extinction than the riskants face than you might realize, my old friend. A stake that will fester and burn in every human heart if we do not give aid to our fullest capacity. Which is, I asked, caught, as always, in his quiet fervor. John looked into the fire for a moment before responding. The chance for hope. The chance for a future, whatever it might be, he said, the virtual crackling of the holographic fire somehow feeling real. Always so poetic, I responded solemnly. Nothing I can say will change your mind about the matter, will it? Nope, afraid not, John responded. Well then, I said, and got up, reluctantly, from the comfortable chair. I guess I have some work to do. John looked back at me, slightly confused, which I always enjoyed seeing. He was getting a bit too smug for his age. What work is that? The council is done for the day. I need to start preparing for mobilization, clearly. John stood up quickly. What? No, we would never ask the Taurians to assist us in this. We signed up for it. It's our fight, he said. Our fight, he said, with no hint of irony or reluctance. He had heard of the Riskians and their impossible struggle just a few passes ago, and it was already their fight. How thunderous the fall of the Quay was to become. Your fight? You are clearly delusional, Admiral John Patrick Silvers, ambassador of the human proximate, which really just underlines my point. The Taurians need to mobilize as well. Who knows what will happen if the reckless humans are left unsupervised without the wisdom of the Taurians? Most assuredly, chaos, I said grimly, shaking my head with a glint in my bulbous eyes. John started back a bit, then stood still. Slowly, a knowing look passed his eyes, and he tried to hide a smile. Nothing I can say will change your mind about the matter, then? John asked innocently. Nope. Afraid not, I responded. We shared a grin. We both knew the fight would be bloody, chaotic, and the loss of lives would be terrible. But as John said, it had to be done, for the sake of the doomed, insignificant race, with no allies or hope. As I turned to walk out the office, John remarked something. We're a horrible influence on you, aren't we? In all the countless cycles, in all the multitudes of eons, absolutely the worst we have ever encountered, my dearest friend, I answered. Dinner later, the wife is making extra spice at Toro Zang, John asked. Oh, my favorite. I'll be there, I accepted, and left the office, banging my head slightly on the way out. I had much to do, not the least to convince the Echelon Master, the Supreme, that we need to aid the humans in this persistent quest of theirs. But somehow, I thought, it wouldn't be all that difficult. End of story. I would like to thank our T5 members and patrons, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Vidmori, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.